Good day and welcome back. Today we go back to 2020 to take a look at Martha Wells Hugo, Nebula and Locus award-winning novel for that year, The Network Effect, part of her Murderbot diaries. What a wonderful bunch of books they are as well. So what I would like to do, as always, is provide a spoiler-free plot overview. I'll talk to my likes and my dislikes in this one. We'll make some recommendations and we'll rank it on our ever-growing Sci-Fi Shed ladder. And I'll also put this one to the memory test and make some observations around this and some of the wonderful novellas that preceded it. So this is an interesting one. It's the first full-length novel in this Murderbot diaries. The first four that preceded it are just short novellas that are really wonderful reading. And it follows on with this Murderbot. It's a rogue sec unit. And the reason that is, it's because it's hacked its governor module. This module that is implanted in these organic and inorganic artificial intelligent robots in many ways, to allow them to be fully controlled by its human owners, and anything that they do that it doesn't follow protocol, that can be executed on the spot with this governor module. But we find that Murderbot has hacked its governor unit and is pretty much rogue. But it has an affinity towards humans, this Murderbot. It loves reading and watching, loves watching space operas, and as much as it hates to admit it, it does really care about its human owners. So we learned that Murderbot is now owned by Dr. Menza, and I think that happened in the third or fourth installment. I've just read these back to back in preparation for this review, but I think it happened in the third or fourth. But anyway, she's now owned by Dr. Menza, and they're on this research expedition. And there's a lot of friction happening on board as well. We find that Murderbot is, not wanting to admit that she really cares for these human crewmates that she has. So she's sort of overstepping the mark at times, being overprotective. So there's a lot of really interesting character play happening here. But they're soon taken over by this by this transport vessel, I should say. There's this big spaceship that comes into orbit and takes them basically captive and takes them through to this black hole. And it doesn't take long for Murderbot to realize that this ship that they're in now, it looks all too familiar, and she puts two and two together and she says, this is art that's taken us captive, that arsehole research transport that we learn about in a second novel here, and I think it was called Artificial Condition. So art is back for all of you who've been watching and reading along. So art is back, and it's sort of something strange going on with art. If it seems that his human crew have been taken over by some alien force of types, and there's a whole lot of really weird, strange mysteries going on, and Murderbot's trying to understand what's happened to Art. Why is he behaving this way? Is this something sinister? Has he been sinister all along? Because it looks like he's dragged Murderbot here on purpose to fulfill whatever aims. So the story sort of escalates from there into this high-stakes space opera full of corporate intrigue and alien artifacts and super intelligent AI and some wonderful witty dialogue between both Art and Murderbot, to what makes it a really interesting finale to this one. So what is there to love in this wonderful novel by Martha Wells in Network Effect? Look, for me, it would definitely have to be the characters in this one, especially the artificial intelligent characters. I mean, Murderbot is absolutely wonderful. I mean, and you really do get a better appreciation for Murderbot if you read the full novellas before you read Network Effect. That was the first time I come across it as well. I'd already read the Murderbot diaries and I was really looking forward to the full-size novel when it came out in 2020, and I wasn't disappointed, or at least not overly disappointed, and I'll come back to that when I talk to my dislikes. So I sort of knew what I was coming into, and it's just wonderful to see the character develop in this one. And what makes Murderbot so wonderful is just her dry and sarcastic humor. I just think it's absolutely wonderful. I really like the banter that she had with Art. I thought the two, especially in the second novel, Artificial Condition, were just absolutely wonderful. So I really did like that banter, that frenemy sort of relationship that Murderbot and Art had together, which I thought was really cool. The other thing I really enjoyed in the novel-length edition of this book was the fact that we saw some of the human characters sort of develop a little bit more. I really liked that. I really liked what we saw in Amina, the way she started to bring something else to the characters in this novel that I thought was really refreshing. I think what also adds to my enjoyment here is that first-person narrative that we find these series of novels are written in. You do really get to feel and see a Murderbot's point of view, which I thought was just absolutely brilliant. And not to give spoilers away, that it's a really interesting way it's written, this novel, when it comes to the different points of view. That I think if you like novels like Ancillary Justice, where she has all these ancillaries, right, and she gets a different point of view through all the eyes of all these ancillaries that she has out there, you'll find something quite similar in this one as well that I think you will like, that I find particularly I found a highlight for me in this novel. The other thing I really enjoyed was just the way that Murderbot loved its soap operas, and I liked how that was a sort of a way of her and Art sharing a moment in many times, and their way of communicating in many ways. So I find that rather interesting. I mean, Murderbot I thought was just a fun, wonderful character. And yeah, just to highlight, I guess, that it was the thing that made this novel and the Murderbot series for me a standout. The other thing I've got to mention in my like section is that I really enjoyed the action scenes in this one. I particularly liked them through the novellas. I thought the novellas were really wonderfully paced and great action scenes throughout, and I gotta say I did enjoy the action scenes in Network Effect as well. They were good, but I'm gonna come straight into my dislikes here and continue my point on the action scenes when I talk to what I didn't like in the Network Effect, and that has got to be the pacing issues. I thought that Martha Wells just does a wonderful job of writing these novellas. They were just brilliant, sharp, well, fast-paced, straight to the point, wonderful action scenes that just captivate you. And I really enjoyed that in the Murderbot Diaries, their first 4 novellas. They were just wonderfully done. But I think it was just a bit of a stretch when it comes to the novels themselves. I think there wasn't just enough in the novel, in Network Effect, to really justify the 315 pages. So I found the pacing was a little bit odd. I found that it just didn't, those action scenes in particular didn't captivate me the way that novellas did, and I found it to drag on a little bit at times, which is sort of odd because I didn't find that to be the case at all when it comes to the novellas. So I mentioned that I read Network Effect pretty much as soon as it came out in 2020, having read all the novellas and being a big fan of those. But I've got to say that I was a little bit disappointed first time round in Network Effect. I just didn't think it worked as a novel, and I just found that those pacing issues and the plot itself didn't quite have the impact that the novellas had. And I think that's also a good intro straight into my memory test, because that's the thing I most remember about Network Effect, is that it didn't quite have the punch, and it didn't quite live up to my anticipation and to my expectations of this one, and it left me a little bit disappointed. And I've got to say that when it comes to the memory test, there's not much, honestly, for a book that is only 5 years old in my head, there's not really much to the plot I could remember. For me, the most memorable of the Murderbot Diaries would have to be the second one, when we're first introduced to Art, because I thought that was just absolutely wonderful. I love the banter between the two. Yes, I've got to say, as a memory test goes, the Network Effect didn't quite hold up. I really honestly couldn't remember much of this one, considering I didn't read it that long ago. So it didn't quite score as well as I would have liked to have seen when it comes to the memory test. So when it comes to recommendations, can I still recommend Network Effect? And the answer is 100% yes. It is a wonderful novel in its right, on its own right. But again, like it seems to be a bit of a repeating theme on the SCI-FI Shed the last couple of weeks. This is yet another one of those novels that I think you've got to read the prequels to it, because it wouldn't quite have the same impact if it came in cold. I think I wouldn't have enjoyed the relationship between Murderbot and Art as much as I did in Network Effect if I wasn't so looking forward to re-seeing Art come back on the scene. I thought Art was an absolutely wonderful character. So look, I would have to say yes, I highly recommend this to all you sort of modern space opera type book readers, right? It's sort of got a lot of those qualities, this one, in it. It does read like a space opera with this sort of wonderful artificial intelligent character. So if you've enjoyed those kind of novels, I'd say start with the Murderbot Diaries. They're only short novellas, so you'll get through them in a week, all 4 of them, and I think it will well position you to really enjoy Network Effect. It's still a highly recommendable novel. recommended novel, I should say. But when it comes to similar novels, the one that comes to mind is a series of novels that I don't see often talked about on this on the YouTube channels, and that's a series of novels called Expeditionary Forces by Craig Allenson. I absolutely love that series, and I've read them, and I don't have them on my TBR to reread anytime soon. But they were an absolutely wonderful series. In particular, I love the relationship between Joe Bishop, I think his name was from memory. He was the main protagonist in this, and his artificial partner in this metal beer can looking thing called Skippy, and that just had a wonderful, and Skippy was just absolutely wonderfully sarcastic, as Murderbot can be at times. And I just really loved the banter between Joe and Skippy in the Expeditionary Forces. So I think if you enjoyed that novel, I'd say definitely have a go at Murderbot, because I think you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, and definitely vice versa. If you've loved the Murderbot Diaries, I'd say definitely have a go at Craig Allenson's Expeditionary Forces. I don't think you'll be disappointed. When it comes to the Hugo and Nebula award-winning novels that we got on the Sci-Fi Shed, I say the one that comes closest when it comes to artificial intelligent characters, and I've talked about that in my review, will be Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, because that was also this rather interesting artificial intelligence, and it had multiple different points of view that you sort of see in Network Effect. So I'd say if you've enjoyed Anne Leckie's Ancillary Justice, I'd say have a go at Murderbot and vice versa. I think there's something there for that you will enjoy. Now, I've picked a couple of others here that talk to artificial intelligence. And the first one is Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Because here we find that the evolution of this artificial intelligence in this supercomputer that was pretty much managing the whole world, and its evolve and into its sentient state. And some rather interesting stuff. And I think this novel is well ahead of its time. But if you want to get a different flavor for artificial intelligence, with a little bit of mystery thrown into it as well, where the AI's motives are not quite self-explanatory, I say definitely have a go at The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's an absolute classic. The other one that comes to mind, because I'm sort of focusing on the artificial intelligent concepts in these ones, would be A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky by Vernor Vinge. Because this one is a rather interesting look at AI as well. Both the benevolent and the malevolent AIs in these novels I thought were really interesting. So if you want to take more of a serious look at AI in what is a classic vintage space opera, then I'd say have a go at Vernor Vinge. Very much a different kind of novel, but if you want to get a bit more of AI, both the good and the bad, I'd say definitely have a go at A Fire Upon the Deep. We've got to rank it on the Sci-Fi Shed ladder. It would be interesting to see where this one lands. Let me flip the camera around and we'll do this one live. So we're back to the Sci-Fi Shed ladder to rank today's Hugo, Nebula and Locus award-winning novel for 2020, Martha Wells' Network Effect. And what a wonderful series it is, but I've got to be fair to the rest of the novels on this board, and I've got to rate it on its own merits, that being Network Effect, and not the whole series as a whole. Because when I look at my fully documented criteria down below, and I look at the concept, there's nothing really new in the concept that we didn't see in the 4 novellas that came before it. I mean, there's a couple of interesting tweaks to the concept, but as a whole, I thought it was a wonderful concept, this Murderbot Diaries and the Murderbot, this rogue sec unit. I thought it was absolutely wonderful, but we'd already seen it multiple times in the novellas preceding it. So it got a couple of points taken off. It still got some pretty good points, actually. Like when I look at my rated criteria here, it still got a 4 out of 5 for its concept. So I only took that 1 point off it because it wasn't necessarily new. We didn't see much new stuff in the Network Effect alone. Where I did take some considerable points off was in the actual execution. Like I mentioned in my dislike sections, I had a problem with some of the pacing in this one. I didn't feel it flowed as nicely as some of the novellas did, and I think that it might be a little bit of inexperience for Martha Wells writing novels, but I could definitely see that it didn't quite work for me when it comes to the execution, and I didn't quite get the enjoyment I did out of the novellas from the novel itself. The characters still got some decent marks, but I did take a couple of points off because, again, I really enjoyed Artificial Condition, the second novella in the series. I thought the banter between Art and Murderbot was just brilliant, and I wanted to see so much more of that. And reading through it, you do see some of that, but for me it was a little bit disappointment. I wanted to get back to that sarcastic and witty banter between the two that wasn't quite as prolific as it was in the second. So again, good marks for the characters, but a couple of points off. I definitely had to take some points off when it comes to the writing because of those pacing issues I talked about. Same again with the plot. I did enjoy the ending, and again, like I mentioned in my dislike section, the memory test didn't do quite well at all in this one, unfortunately. So I'm looking at the B side of the board because I think that's going to be a fair place to start. Now, some of the wonderful novels that we've got on here include novels that we talked to in Deepness in the Sky by Werner Vinge. But when it comes to the concept and the sheer magnitude of that space opera, and especially some of the novels that preceded it on the board, I don't think it's going to have, or actually does it? Let's go back to some interesting novels like The City and the City and Man Plus and Babel 17, because they were all rather different. They're ranked towards the bottom of this column on the B side because of similar kind of critiques. Like The City and City was a really interesting concept, but sometimes I thought the writing was a bit poor. Babel 17, again, was just an interesting concept. It was a well-written novel, but some of the characters, some of the plot was a little bit, didn't quite hold up for me. And the same goes for Man Plus. So, interesting. It probably comes close to that. But then we got some wonderful novels like, you know, A Memory Called Empire and Ancillary Justice. And Ancillary Justice was, again, just a really wonderfully written novel. Oh man, this is going to be difficult. Maybe I should have thought about this a little bit more off camera. Because Ancillary Justice, right? And A Memory Called Empire. Ancillary Justice, I'm thinking maybe there, but then we got Stand on Zanzibar, which was a really interesting novel as well. The Yiddish Policeman's Union, Green Mask, absolute classic. My favourite in Silverberg, Terminal Experiment. Yeah, Murderbot was definitely better than the Terminal Experiment. And I can probably safely say better than the rest. So the question is, the wonderful writing in Nettle and Bone, Michael Swanwick's Stations of the Tide, Time It Changes, Barrier, wonderful character-driven novels, Ancillary Justice, Terminal. It's definitely better than Terminal Experiment. Okay, I'm gonna give it. I think I'm gonna give it to Martha Wells. Because it is still a really wonderful character, is Murderbot. Calculating, and it's still very much, you know, typical, you know, artificial intelligence, wonderful action scenes, all the stuff that you love to see in a modern space opera. And is anything really else that would challenge that? Now, look, I think I'm going to leave it there. I think I've surprised myself. I didn't think it was going to rate as highly as it has, but when I apply my criteria, I mean, it is a great concept, wonderful characters. Yes, it's got some pacing issues. Yes, I don't think it was good as the novellas, but still a wonderful reading experience. And I would only say that maybe I am a little bit prejudiced because I did read all the novels leading up to it. And I thoroughly enjoyed my journey through the Murderbot series this second time round. Hey, are you a big Martha Wells fan? Do you love Murderbot? I thought it is absolutely fantastic. Just a wonderfully written character, really interesting twerks, and her love for space operas, or soap operas I should say, was absolutely epic, and I really enjoyed that. Hey, I've been Peter. This has been The Shed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Where would you have ranked it? That's where we sit tonight. And I don't think I'm disappointed. I'll see you next time in The Shed.